Difficulty in a video game can really change your perception of it, ranging from, okay, this is so boring, what am I doing with my life, all the way to, I hate this game so much I'll never play it again. And I think this is a fascinating topic to discuss, so when I asked you about it a few weeks ago, I got some very interesting comments. Even though some of my friends always choose the highest difficulty available, which might be surprising, and by surprising I don't mean the difficulty part, I mean the me having friends part, sometimes easy can be the way to go. Especially in games like Detroit Become Human, where the difficulty only affects the complexity of the QTEs, or for that matter any other game where I am motivated by the story instead of gameplay. Other great example is sandbox type games where you, as a player, create your own adventure. I used to play Minecraft a lot back in the day, and I didn't really play it for its survival elements, but I was more interested in building automated farms and playing with mods instead, so having enemies do more damage and my hunger bar drain quicker was just a distraction from what I wanted my experience to be. Also, there are games where I would switch to easy during cleanup after beating the main story, which was exactly what I did with God of War 2018, and I don't feel guilty about it at all. Not to mention that playing on easy can be ridiculously fun because you feel overpowered, but is that really your best choice? There is a consensus that choosing that normal or middle difficulty is the way the developers intended for the game to be played, and I don't necessarily disagree. Truth be told, along with 2/3 of you, in most cases I do choose that medium difficulty when I start a new game. I completed Far Cry 3 on normal, and although I rarely died, I still had fun feeling like a badass murdering everyone on sight. Like really, it was a bloodbath, but without the blood. So just a bath. While doing research for this video, I learned about something called the flow, the purpose of which is keeping players' engagement level high by making sure that the challenge is proportional to skill and familiarity with the in-game mechanics, and it usually looks something like this. And because games are supposed to give you more challenge as you gradually progress and learn the mechanics, picking that middle difficulty is usually a safe bet, even more so if you can change it mid-game, something that luckily you can do in most modern titles. By the way, some games even have dynamic difficulty instead of the classic selection we are used to. In Control, you can choose your challenge level at all, and it's because the game adjusts to your performance. The better you are doing, the more aggressive enemies become, and the more of them you will encounter, but if you die multiple times in a row, it will adapt and become easier, and I believe that this is one of the main reasons why I enjoyed combat in Control so much, because I played it as it was intended by developers. But sometimes for a game to truly shine, you need to play it on hard, or hardest, or hard-ish. When there's not enough challenge and you keep getting thrown into combat scenarios time and time again, they just become boring, and depending on your skill level, even normal can feel too easy at times. Now, I'm not saying that I am a pro gamer by any means, but I did play a lot of games, and like with everything you do in life, after playing video games for a long time, you naturally become better at them. Or, you know, okay-ish. In my case. So when I was playing Rise of the Tomb Raider on normal difficulty, I very quickly became bored by the combat because, unlike easy, you usually can't just run around and hit bullets like it's a free-for-all buffet, but if you pay just enough attention and don't completely throw yourself into a gunfight, you can easily finish all the missions without too much struggle. And in that case, it becomes even more boring because you're still not challenged enough to be engaged in combat, but you also can't really be reckless and just rush by all those sections, something that can be fun in its own right. That being said, picking hard can seem like a huge mountain to climb, so I want to tell you a story. In 2013, I got my PS3 to play The Last of Us, and upon finishing it once, I told one of my PC gamer friends about it, and we decided to play it together. I brought it to his place, we booted it up, selected a new game, and when we were prompted about difficulty and I was about to select normal because this is what I used to do at the time, he looked at me and said,
"You can't live in fear. You need to believe in yourself, my friend. We will be playing this game on the hardest difficulty available."
Which was Survivor at the time. Not going to lie, I wasn't thrilled at first as I never really challenged myself with a game to that extent at this point, but eventually I did go along with it. Mostly because I couldn't say no to Morgan Freeman. But as we progressed, it made me realize that playing this game on this specific difficulty turned it into a completely different experience. Suddenly I couldn't just shoot everybody in the face and go along with it because I didn't have enough bullets, and even if I did, I couldn't just waste them like that. Not to mention other in-game choices like trying to kill everyone so I would have the option to properly loot the place versus trying to sneak by to save on resources with the price of potentially missing on some goodies. And damn was it fun! On normal I never had to think about it, but here every combat situation became exciting and felt dangerous instead of, oh shit, here we go again feeling. Now don't get me wrong, I was struggling with combat, but it made me properly engaged in gameplay like never before, and I really felt that I was becoming significantly better as I was progressing, and that's why I still remember this experience 8 years later. Another game that handled it amazingly in my opinion is Witcher 3, but because I didn't play it yet, I thought I'll bring in someone who actually completed it on Deathmarch difficulty. Joe, aka Guy Ferruski.
In my personal opinion, The Witcher 3 on Deathmarch is the real way to play the game. Realistically, it's only as hard as you make it. For example, if you play like an overexcited botchling, then you're most likely going to get punished for it. But if you approach the game like Geralt or Rivia, Witcher extraordinaire, it becomes much easier and much more enjoyable. Long story short, Deathmarch makes you play The Witcher 3 as a Witcher. Who would have thought? Like any high difficulty, the enemies do hit harder and have more health, but it becomes much less relevant when you do the proper research and preparation. Every enemy has a weakness. All you have to do is research and exploit it. Whether it be oils for your sword, specific spells, or potions you take, there's always a way to overcome every obstacle. And it feels damn good. Now get that game played, Ilya.
To be fair, I agree, I definitely should. Now, there are a ton of other games that do it right. Just off the top of my head, Alien Isolation, Resident Evil 2, South Park The Fractured But Whole, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and I can go on, but unfortunately not every game can pull off a good difficulty scalability, and that's why when I was playing the Uncharted trilogy on brutal difficulty a few weeks ago, it made me feel one specific feeling. Frustration. And boredom. And anger. Okay, so more than one feeling. I might not be amazing at video games, but I have one thing going for me. I can just set checkpoints like a Q&A tester who is getting paid by the hour until I get through a section just right. I mean, I finished The Last of Us Remastered on grounded difficulty while only taking damage 3 times and barely using any bullets. For fun. Yeah, I have a weird definition of fun. But Uncharted on Brutal wasn't fun at all. Basically it changes the game in 2 different ways. You die in 1 or 2 shots, your enemies are bullet sponges. I can almost imagine the meeting where it was decided. Okay everyone, on today's agenda we have to settle how we will handle difficulty in Uncharted games. Does anyone want to go first? Yeah, go ahead. We can improve our AI for higher difficulties to make enemies better at flanking and coordinating, rework our combat system to force interesting risk versus reward situations, and try to make stealth work better so it will become a viable option. Okay, sounds great. Anyone else? Yeah, so how about you take more damage and your enemies take less damage? A problem with that is, most of the time you are stuck behind cover and pop your head from time to pick off an enemy only to get shot from across the map and die so you can do it again until you are lucky enough to get through the next section, where guess what? You'll do exactly the same. But how does it make this difficulty worth experiencing? In short, it doesn't. It just tests your perseverance and that's about it, which in return creates a frustrating gaming experience because instead of the game being hard for the sake of you adapting your strategy and becoming better at it, it just feels unfair. And sadly, this lazy approach is what a lot of game developers default to, and in my opinion, that's why some people shy away from playing on hard, because they just want to have a good time and enjoy the game without being frustrated instead, and I get that. I guess where I'm going with it is, if you're playing for the story or a quick completion, going with easy is probably just fine, but if gameplay is your motivator and you don't feel engaged enough on normal, maybe you should switch to hard. You might regret it later, but you'll never know unless you try. Thank you for watching my video, consider subscribing if you enjoyed it.